By the time Bella leaned close enough to whisper it, the Alpha King already knew something was wrong. She could feel it in the way his pulse stuttered beneath her palm, in the way the great hall seemed to inhale with them, firelight shivering, banners holding their breath. This was the moment that would fracture everything. "Your Luna sold you out," she breathed, her lips barely grazing his ear. "They're coming tonight." For half a heartbeat, King Nolan Frostborn went utterly still. Around them, the moon vigil celebration continued. Music, laughter, hundreds of wolves drinking and dancing, oblivious to the storm about to break. His hand closed over hers where it rested on his shoulder, firm, grounding, devastatingly intimate. And she realized with a sick twist of irony that this was the closest they'd ever been. The woman warning him of betrayal, the king who had every reason not to trust her. He turned his head carefully, silver gray eyes cutting into her like moonlight through ice. They searched her face not for fear, but for truth, for motive, for the lie he was certain must be there. "You have 10 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have you chained in the dungeons before the torches burn out," he growled low enough that only she could hear. Fair ask, considering she'd been sentenced to exile 3 months ago. Being back in his citadel made her a criminal twice over. Tonight, she hadn't come to the frostbound citadel to be brave. She came because guilt was a heavier chain than fear, and because she knew exactly how this story ended if she stayed silent. Nolan dead before dawn. The pack splintered. War spilling south like blood through snow. "They're coming now, using the celebration as cover," she said, forcing her voice steady. "Your Western Watch is already compromised. Your guards think they're receiving reinforcements from House Cursane. They're not." His jaw tightened. A muscle ticked near his temple. Controlled fury, leashed by discipline honed over decades of rule. "And my Luna?" he asked. The word landed between them like a blade. "She gave them the signal routes," Bella said, "and the timing, and your sleep schedule." Something old and broken flickered in his eyes before it vanished behind steel. At last, he released her hand. "Why tell me?" he asked. "Why now?" His Luna's laugh still echoed in Bella's nightmares, that cruel sound from the night her life had shattered. She'd loved the wrong person once too, and she recognized that same hollow ache in him, and beneath that, an old debt she was trying to repay. But she couldn't say all that, not to a man who had every reason to suspect her. "Because you're not the monster they're painting you to be," she said softly. His gaze lingered, sharp and unreadable. Then somewhere deep beneath the citadel, a horn sounded, low, wrong, and far too early. The hunt had begun, and this time she wasn't sure which of them was prey. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe. It will make my day. Nolan's hand shot out, catching her wrist before she could step back into the crowd. His grip was iron, his expression carved from winter itself. "You're staying with me," he said. Not a question. A decree. "Why?" "If you're lying, I want you close enough to kill." His thumb pressed against her pulse point, feeling the frantic rhythm there. "If you're telling the truth, you're the only person in this citadel I can trust right now." The irony wasn't lost on her. The last time she was in this hall, she'd been dragged before Luna Cordelia in chains, accused of stealing from her private quarters. A convenient lie? The truth was far more dangerous. Bella had seen Cordelia meeting with the Blackwater emissaries in the Eastern Gardens at midnight, had watched her pass them sealed documents she had no business possessing. She was naive enough to think telling someone would matter. She'd gone to Casper first, her fiancé, the man she'd thought would protect her. He'd held her face in his hands and promised he'd handle it. "Let me talk to the Luna," he'd said, I'll make sure you're safe." 2 hours later, she was in chains. Cordelia had smiled when the guards hauled Bella before the council. "Such a shame," she'd said, her voice dripping false sympathy. Her gaze raked over Bella with casual cruelty. "I had such hopes for you and Casper, but I cannot allow thieves in my household, no matter how desperate they are, to rise above their station." Casper had stood 3 feet away, silent. When Cordelia offered him a choice, denounce Bella publicly or lose his position in the guard, he'd chosen his career without hesitation. "I cannot be mated to a thief," he'd announced, and the bond between them, thin and unfinished as it was, had snapped like thread. The pain had been exquisite. She'd been banished that night with nothing but shame and the clothes on her back, but she hadn't left. She'd circled back to the servants' entrance, begged the head cook for work under a false name. For 3 months, she'd scrubbed floors and changed linens and made herself invisible while she watched. Confirmed what she'd suspected. Cordelia wasn't just ambitious, she was planning a coup. And now, with Nolan's hand wrapped around her wrist and chaos erupting beneath them, Bella understood she just killed any chance of continuing to hide. "Come," Nolan said, already heading toward the servants' corridor. He moved with the precision of someone who'd mapped every escape route in this place 100 times over. She followed him, because what else could she do? The corridor was narrow, carved from the mountain itself. Ancient runes marked the walls. Torches cast Nolan's profile in sharp relief, all hard edges and barely leashed violence. He was beautiful the way winter was beautiful, deadly and unforgiving and impossible to look away from. She'd watched him for months, serving wine at state dinners where he barely touched his glass, changing sheets in his private chambers when he was away, breathing in the scent of him, something wild that made her wolf whine with recognition. She knew he took his coffee black, that he read military treatises before bed, that he sometimes stood at his window for hours, staring at the northern mountains like they held answers he couldn't find. She knew far too much about him, yet he knew nothing about her. "The Western Watch," he said without slowing. "How compromised?" "Captain Valen took a bribe 3 weeks ago. Gold and a promise of land in the Southern Territories once the coup succeeds." Her wolf stirred uneasily. Speaking treason aloud felt like swallowing glass. "He's reassigned the most loyal guards to night patrols on the eastern border. The ones left are either bought or incompetent." "And you know this how?" "Because people don't see servants," Bella said. "Luna Cordelia keeps correspondence in a locked drawer in her vanity. She doesn't realize the lock is broken." He cut her a glance, something sharp and assessing in those pale eyes. "You've been here, in the Citadel?" "Yes." "After you were banished?" "Yes." "That's punishable by death." "So is treason," she said. "At least my crime has a purpose." His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, something darker, more dangerous. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most reckless." "Can't I be both?" This time he did smile, brief and devastating, and something in her chest cracked open at the sight of it. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with a guard sprinting in the opposite direction. The man skidded to a halt, chest heaving. "Your Majesty!" He was young, barely 20, with terror bright in his eyes. "The Western Gates, they're under attack. Captain Valen is missing. We need—" "I know," Nolan cut him off. "Sound the secondary alarm. Get everyone to the inner keep. No one goes near the western halls. And find Commander Sylvain. Tell her to secure the armory before they reach it. But Luna Cordelia is exactly where she needs to be," Nolan said, and the finality in his voice made the guard pale. "Go." The man fled. Bella's heart hammered against her ribs. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere we can see the whole board," he said. They climbed a spiral staircase, the sounds of battle growing louder below, shouts, the clash of steel, the bone-deep howl of wolves engaging in combat. Her own wolf pressed against her skin, caught between the instinct to fight and the terror of what fighting actually meant. She'd never killed anyone, never even drawn blood in anger. Tonight might change that. Halfway up the stairs, Nolan stopped abruptly. His hand shot out, pressing her back against the stone wall. His body bracketed hers, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him, could smell smoke and steel and something darker underneath. Adrenaline, maybe, or fury barely held in check. "Quiet," he breathed against her ear. She froze. Voices drifted up from below, 2 men speaking in low tones. "Told us midnight. Why are we moving early?" "Because the Luna said so." "You want to argue with her?" "I want to get paid. Hard to collect gold when you're dead." Footsteps, getting closer. Nolan's hand moved to the blade at his hip. Bella felt the shift in him, predator recognizing prey. His breathing slowed, steadied, and she realized he was about to kill them both, quick, silent, efficient. Her first instinct was to look away, close her eyes. Instead, she watched with quiet horror. The first man rounded the corner and died before he could draw breath to scream. Nolan moved like water, like shadow, the blade opening the mercenary's throat in a single precise cut. The second man managed to pull his sword, but Nolan was already inside his guard, driving a dagger up under his ribs and into his heart. Both bodies dropped within seconds of each other. Nolan cleaned his blades on one of their cloaks, expression distant. When he looked up and found Bella staring, something flickered across his face. Not quite shame, but close. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said quietly. "Don't be." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "They were here to kill you. Still." He stopped, studying her face. "You're not afraid of me." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "No." "Why not?" Because 5 years ago, he'd shown her family mercy when he didn't have to, a kindness she'd never forgotten. And in the months since she'd returned, she'd seen him spare a servant who'd accidentally broken a priceless vase, watched him sit for hours with a dying soldier's family, and heard him laugh with genuine warmth exactly twice. She'd also seen the careful distance he kept from his Luna, the way they never touched unless protocol demanded it, the way his expression went carefully blank whenever Cordelia entered a room. Whatever bound them together, it wasn't love. It was duty, and duty could be just as suffocating as chains. Finally, Bella spoke up. "Violence in defense of your people isn't the same as cruelty, and I know the difference." Something raw and unguarded moved through his eyes. He stepped closer, and she could feel the heat of him, the barely contained energy that thrummed beneath his skin. His hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite touching, like he was giving her a chance to pull away. She didn't. The moment stretched between them, loaded with possibility and danger, and the kind of want that could burn down kingdoms. She could feel his heartbeat, could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Duty versus desire, logic versus the raw pull of whatever this was building between them. Then the citadel shuddered. An explosion, somewhere below. The floor trembled beneath their feet. Dust rained from the ceiling. Nolan pulled back, the mask of the king slamming down over the man. "We need to move. Now." They ran. The war room was in the eastern tower, 3 floors up and accessible through a series of interconnected chambers that would slow any attackers. Nolan navigated them with practiced ease, and Bella realized he'd designed these defenses himself. Every corner, every doorway, calculated, strategic. They burst into a circular chamber lined with maps and weapon racks. 3 people were already there. An older man with silver threading his dark hair and scars crossing his weathered face. Commander Davith, Bella realized, the king's military advisor. A woman in battle leathers who moved with a warrior's grace. Sylvain, his second. And Bella's stomach dropped. Cordelia stood by the windows, her sapphire gown pristine, her face a perfect mask of concern. When she saw Bella, something venomous flashed in her eyes before disappearing behind false confusion. "Nolan," Cordelia breathed, moving toward him with practiced grace. "Thank God, I heard the alarm. What's happening? Are we under attack?" "We are," Nolan said evenly, not moving to meet her. "The Western Watch has been compromised." Cordelia's hand flew to her throat, every inch the frightened Luna. "Compromised? But how is that possible? Captain Valen is one of our most loyal—" "Valen is a traitor," Nolan said flatly, "bought and paid for by our enemies." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Cordelia's perfect composure flickered. "Who told you this? What proof do you have?" "Enough to be certain." Nolan's gaze slid to Bella, then back to his Luna. "This is Bella Thayer. She brought me intelligence about the attack before it began." Cordelia went very still. "Bella Thayer!" She tasted the name like poison. "She was supposed to be banished for stealing from my private quarters." "I'm not a thief," Bella said quietly, meeting the Luna's eyes. "You framed me because I saw something I shouldn't have." "How dare you speak to me? Enough!" Nolan's voice cracked like a whip. He moved to the central table, spreading a map of the citadel across its surface. His movements were controlled, precise, but Bella could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched. "We don't have time for this. Bella, show me exactly what you know." She stepped forward, hyper-aware of Cordelia's glare burning into her back, of Sylvain and Davith watching this play out with varying degrees of suspicion. The map was detailed, showing not just the citadel but the surrounding forest, the network of caves beneath, the hidden escape routes. Her hands shook as she pointed to the western gates. "They'll breach here first." Valen left a gap in the patrol rotation, 2 minutes where the gates are unwatched. The Blackwater forces came through disguised as reinforcements from House Cursane. "Came through?" Sylvain asked sharply. "Past tense?" "They're already inside," Bella confirmed. "The attack was supposed to happen at midnight, but they moved early. Someone must have—" She stopped. Realization hit like ice water. Cordelia had seen her whispering to Nolan. She must have sent word immediately, moving the attack up before Nolan could prepare defenses. Cordelia smiled thinly. "Go on. Finish your theory." Bella's wolf snarled in her chest. "Once inside, they'll split into 3 groups." She traced lines on the map, forcing her voice steady. "One to secure the armory, one to the royal chambers, and one here, to the war room." "To kill me," Nolan finished, his expression glacial. "Yes." Cordelia laughed, the sound brittle and wrong. "And we're supposed to believe this? She's a disgraced Omega with every reason to cause chaos. For all we know, she's working with the attackers. This could all be a ploy to—" Nolan turned to face his Luna. "Then explain how she knew about the attack before our own scouts reported it. Explain how she knew Valen was compromised when even I didn't suspect him. Explain how every detail she's given me so far has been accurate." Cordelia's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in her eyes. Perhaps she has allies feeding her information. Perhaps she's more connected than she appears. "Or perhaps," Bella said, meeting Cordelia's gaze, "I've been watching you. I know about your meetings with the Blackwater emissaries in the Eastern Gardens. I know about the letters you've been sending, sealed with your private mark. I know you promised them access to the northern trade routes in exchange for 3 territories to rule as your own. The room fell silent. Davith swore softly. Sylvain's hand moved to her sword. Cordelia's mask cracked for a moment. You're insane. Nolan, she's clearly... Is she? Nolan moved around the table with predatory grace. Each step was measured, controlled, but Bella could see the fury beneath. Everything she said has been true so far. The attack came when she warned it would. Valen was exactly where she said he'd be. He stopped in front of Cordelia, and the air between them crackled with tension. Tell me she's wrong. Tell me you haven't been meeting with our enemies. Of course I haven't. Don't lie to me, Cordelia. And just like that, her composure shattered like glass. You want truth? Fine. Her voice turned sharp, bitter. Yes, I met with them. Yes, I've been planning, because you gave me no choice. Bella's breath caught. Davith moved to block the door. Sylvain drew her sword. Nolan went utterly still. Explain. You married me because the council demanded it, Cordelia spat. After your father died, they needed you to take a Luna with the right bloodline, the right connections. I was convenient, useful, a political necessity. She laughed, ugly and harsh. 3 years, Nolan. 3 years I've stood beside you, played the perfect Luna, smiled for the court. And not once have you looked at me the way a mate should. I'm an ornament, a pretty piece in your collection of alliances. I treated you with respect. I don't want respect. Her voice broke. I want to be seen, to matter, to be more than a convenient solution to a political problem. The Blackwater Alliance saw what you couldn't. They offered me 3 territories to rule. Real power. Not this... She gestured at the room, at him, at everything. This cold, empty performance of a marriage where I'm nothing but a symbol. Nolan's expression was carved from stone, but Bella saw the wound beneath, the confirmation of something he'd always suspected, always feared. So you chose to kill me. I finally chose myself, Cordelia said. Her words hung in the air, sharp and irrevocable. Bella felt something twist in her chest, not sympathy, exactly, but recognition. She understood what it felt like to be invisible, to be chosen for what you could provide rather than who you were, but she'd never chosen murder as the solution. You could have left, Nolan said quietly. You could have asked for a separation. I would have granted it. And been branded a failure? A Luna who couldn't hold her king's interest? Cordelia shook her head. At least this way, I'm still a queen, powerful in my own right. You're a murderer, Bella shot back. And everyone who's died tonight, your own people, their blood is on your hands. Cordelia's gaze snapped to her. You have no right to speak to me. You're nothing, an Omega servant who couldn't even keep her own mate's loyalty. The words landed like blows, designed to wound. Once, they would have destroyed her. Now, Bella just smiled. You're right. I am an Omega. I was a servant, and Casper was a coward who chose power over principles. She took a step forward. But at least I didn't betray my people. At least I'm not so desperate to be seen that I'd burn down the world to get attention. Cordelia's face contorted with rage. You little... Davith's voice cut through the tension. Your Majesty, we have movement in the Eastern Corridor. Multiple hostiles. Nolan's hand went to his sword. How many? At least 20, heading this way. Cordelia's smile was sharp and bitter. I told them to wait until midnight, but I suppose they got impatient. Or maybe... Her gaze flicked to Bella. They realized the plan was compromised. Did you signal them? Nolan asked. When you saw Bella warning me? Of course I did. What choice did I have? Cordelia drew a concealed blade from the folds of her gown. Small, deadly, the edge gleaming silver. You should have loved me, Nolan. This would have been so much simpler. She moved fast, faster than Bella expected, lunging for Nolan with the blade aimed at his throat. But Bella was even faster. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. Her body reacted on pure instinct, throwing herself between them as silver flashed in the torchlight. Pain exploded across her shoulder, white-hot and consuming. The blade had been meant for Nolan's neck. Instead, it caught her just below the collarbone, slicing deep. She gasped, stumbling, and Nolan caught her before she could fall. Bella, I'm fine, she managed, though blood was already soaking through her dress. Stop her! But Cordelia was already moving, shoving past Daveth with supernatural strength. The older man lunged for her, but she was faster, more desperate. She hit the door at a full sprint. Sylvain started after her, sword drawn, but Nolan's voice stopped her cold. Let her go! Your Majesty! We have bigger problems. He was lowering Bella into a chair, his hands gentle despite the fury in his eyes. Blood stained his fingers where he pressed against her wound. Cordelia can run to her precious alliance, but first, we survive tonight. The door burst open. Guards poured in, weapons drawn, and behind them came the sounds of battle. Close now, too close. Metal on metal. Screams. The wet sound of steel finding flesh. Nolan issued orders with calm precision, positioning defenders, sending runners to redirect what reinforcements they could. He moved like a man who'd trained for this his entire life, and Bella understood why his people followed him. He wasn't just a king. He was a leader who would bleed with them. Can you stand? He asked her, ripping fabric from his own shirt to bind her shoulder. Yes. Can you fight? She thought of her past 3 months spent invisible and afraid, watching the world move around her like she didn't exist. Yes, she said. He handed her a dagger from his belt. Their fingers brushed, and she felt the shock of it down to her bones. That same electric awareness from earlier, magnified by adrenaline and shared danger and the raw understanding that they might both die tonight. Stay close to me, he said, holding her gaze. I'm not losing you. His words were practical, strategic, but the way he looked at her when he said them was anything but. They moved as one into the corridor. The battle was chaos. Wolves in both forms, blood on ancient stone, the acrid smell of smoke beginning to curl through the air. Someone had set fires in the lower levels. Bella fought beside Nolan, her movements clumsy at first, but improving with desperation. She'd never been trained for combat, but survival was a brutal teacher. When a Blackwater soldier came at her with a sword, she ducked under his guard and drove her dagger into his side. The blade scraped bone. He went down screaming. She'd just killed someone. The horror of it clawed at her throat, but there was no time to process it. Another attacker, another desperate parry. Her wounded shoulder screamed with every movement, but she pushed through the pain. Stopping meant dying, and she wasn't done yet. Nolan was a storm beside her. Lethal, precise, cutting through enemies like they were nothing. But even he couldn't be everywhere at once. A mercenary got past his guard, blade aimed for his back. Bella saw it happening, saw the angle, saw the killing blow about to land. She threw herself forward, her dagger finding the mercenary's throat before he could complete the strike. Blood sprayed hot across her face. Nolan spun, saw what she'd done, and something, fierce and possessive, flashed in his eyes. Thank you. They fought their way through corridors slick with blood, past bodies of people Bella had served meals to just hours ago. The citadel was beautiful, all carved stone and ancient tapestries and centuries of history. Now it was a slaughterhouse. They were losing. Badly. "Fall back," Nolan ordered. "To the inner keep. We'll make our stand there." They retreated in stages, fighting every step. Bella's entire body was one massive ache, blood loss making her vision swim. But she kept moving, kept fighting. They reached the inner keep, a fortified tower at the citadel's heart. Nolan's remaining forces flooded in behind them, 20 wolves, maybe less. The rest were dead, captured, or scattered. They barricaded the doors with whatever they could find. The fires below were spreading. They could feel the heat through the floor, could see smoke beginning to curl under the door frame. "How long can we hold?" Sylvain asked, breathing hard. Blood matted her dark hair, but she was still standing. "Until dawn," Nolan said. "Reinforcements will come from the eastern garrison at first light. We just have to survive until then." 6 hours. They had to last 6 hours against superior numbers, with dwindling supplies and a fire spreading beneath them. Bella sank against the wall, her legs finally giving out. Nolan was beside her immediately, checking her wound with hands that were surprisingly gentle for someone who'd just cut down a dozen enemies. "It's deep," he said quietly, his jaw tight. "You need a healer." "Add it to the list." She tried to smile. "Right after, don't die and survive until morning." He didn't smile back. Instead, he touched her face, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. The firelight caught in them, turning silver to gold, and she could see everything he was feeling. Fear, fury, something raw and unguarded that made her breath catch. "Why did you come back?" he asked. "You could have disappeared, built a life somewhere else. Why risk it all to warn me?" "Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't," she said. "Because 5 years ago, my father died and left our family drowning in debt. You forgave it. You probably don't even remember. It was one decision among thousands, but my mother survived that winter because of you." Her voice dropped. "And because I've spent 3 months watching you, learning you, everything I saw told me you were worth saving." His thumb traced her jaw, achingly slow. "A debt, then. You came back to repay a debt." "I came back because of a debt," she admitted. "I stayed because of you." Something raw moved through his expression. "I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Power, favor, access. You've already repaid whatever you think you owe. So what do you want now?" "I want you to live," Bella whispered. The words hung between them, intimate despite the chaos, raging outside their barricade. His gaze dropped to her mouth, and she felt the hunger in it, raw and barely leashed. "Bella!" An explosion rocked the tower. Stone dust rained from the ceiling. Someone shouted that the doors wouldn't hold much longer, that the fires were climbing, that they needed to evacuate or they'd all burn. Nolan pulled back, but his hand found hers in the smoke and darkness, squeezed once, and held on. "We're going to survive this," he said. "And when we do, you and I are going to have a very long conversation." "About?" His smile was knife-sharp and devastating. "Everything." The doors broke an hour before dawn. They came in waves, Blackwater soldiers, mercenaries, rogues drawn by gold and the promise of chaos. Nolan's forces fought like cornered wolves, because that's exactly what they were. Desperate, outnumbered, but refusing to yield. Bella's dagger had long since broken. She fought with a sword now, taken from a fallen guard. Her shoulder was agony. every movement sending lightning through her nerves, but she pushed through it. Her wolf surged beneath her skin, lending her strength she shouldn't have had. Someone grabbed her from behind. She threw her head back, felt the satisfying crunch of a broken nose, twisted free, and drove her blade home. The body dropped, and she was already moving to the next threat. She'd become something different tonight, something harder, sharper. Through the chaos, she caught glimpses of Nolan, always moving, always fighting, his presence an anchor in the storm. Once, their eyes met across the carnage, and she saw her own desperation reflected back at her. They were losing, but they were going to go down fighting. Then, cutting through the sounds of battle like salvation itself, a horn rang out. Different from before. Higher. Clearer. The Eastern garrison. The reinforcements had arrived. The Blackwater forces faltered, caught between Nolan's desperate defenders and the fresh troops flooding into the citadel. What had been a siege became a rout in minutes. The invaders broke, fleeing into the forest or throwing down their weapons in surrender. By the time the sun crested the mountains, painting the snow gold and red, it was over. Bella stood in the war room, returned to it somehow, though she couldn't remember climbing the stairs. Her entire body shook with exhaustion and shock. Around her, people moved with grim purpose, securing the citadel, tending wounds, counting the dead. Nolan appeared in the doorway, and relief crashed through her so violently her knees nearly buckled. He was covered in blood and soot, and God knew what else, but he was alive, whole. His eyes found her immediately, and the raw emotion that crossed his face stole what little breath she had left. "You're alive," he said hoarsely. "So are you." He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. She should have stepped back, should have maintained distance, remembered her place, protected herself from more heartbreak. But she was exhausted, of pretending, of being invisible, of denying what she felt. So she let herself lean into him, let herself take comfort in his warmth, in the way his hand curved around the back of her head like she mattered. "You saved my life," he murmured against her hair. "Multiple times." "Who's counting?" "I am." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands coming up to frame her face. "You jumped in front of a blade for me. You fought beside me. I did what anyone would do." "Anyone?" He let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "Bella, 43 people knew about this attack. 43 conspirators. You know how many warned me? One. You." His voice dropped. "You warned me when silence would have been safer. He shook his head, something raw flickering across his face. "You saw me, and somehow decided I was worth saving." Tears burned behind her eyes. "You are. You're worth." He kissed her, or she kissed him. It didn't matter who moved first. What mattered was the way he responded, fierce and hungry and almost desperate, like he'd been holding back for longer than just tonight. His mouth was hot and claiming, his hands anchoring her close, and she felt something inside her chest crack open, some wall she'd built to survive. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his thumb traced circles on her jaw. "Cordelia escaped," he said quietly. "We found Casper among the prisoners. He tried to run when he saw the garrison coming." "I don't care about Casper," she said, and realized with startling clarity that it was true. "He doesn't matter anymore. He never really did." "No," Nolan agreed, his gaze searching hers. "He doesn't." Someone cleared their throat behind them. Sylvain stood in the doorway, tactfully looking elsewhere, though a slight smile played at her lips. "Your Majesty, the council is assembling. They'll want your report. And the prisoners. We have 43 in custody, including several of Cordelia's personal guard." "And Casper Harding?" "Chains, awaiting your judgment." Nolan's jaw tightened. He looked at Bella, a question in his eyes. Banishment, she said softly. Give him the same mercy he showed me. Let him survive on his own and see how long his principles last. Something like pride flickered across Nolan's face. Banishment, he told Sylvain. Strip him of rank and title. He has until sunset to be beyond our borders. Sylvain nodded and disappeared. Nolan turned back to Bella, his expression turning serious. We need to talk about what happens next. You can't go back to the kitchens. Even if you wanted to, which I desperately hope you don't. It's not safe. Cordelia still has allies, people who might blame you for exposing her. I wasn't planning to hide anymore, Bella said. I'm done being invisible. Good. His hands settled on her waist, thumbs brushing the fabric there in a way that made her breath catch. Because I'm going to need someone I can trust in my inner circle. Someone who sees clearly, who tells the truth even when it's dangerous. Someone who, his voice dropped, intimate and certain, jumps in front of blades for me. She smiled despite everything. That's a low bar for employment. Then let me raise it. He pulled her closer until their bodies were flush. Stay with me, Bella. Not as a servant, not as someone hiding. Stay as... He hesitated, and she saw vulnerability flash across his face. As whatever this is between us. Let me figure it out with you. Her heart stuttered. Nolan... I know it's complicated. I know it's too soon. I know I'm technically still married even if my Luna just tried to kill me and fled to our enemies. He laughed, bitter and tired. I know all the reasons this is a terrible idea, but I also know that I've never felt more seen than when you looked at me tonight. And I want more of that. More of you. Her mind raced through all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong, but she'd spent years being careful, being convenient, making herself smaller so others could feel bigger. Look where that had gotten her. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay. She kissed him again, softer this time. But I'm keeping the dagger, and the sword, and probably several other weapons. He grinned, and it transformed his entire face from Winter King to someone younger, lighter, almost boyish. I wouldn't expect anything less. 3 weeks passed like fever dreams. The citadel was cleaned, repaired, reinforced with new wards and additional guards. The traitors faced judgment, some executed, some imprisoned, some banished depending on their level of involvement. Caspar left at sunset on the day of his sentencing. Bella watched from the battlements as he passed through the gates, head down, shoulders hunched. Once, she might have felt something. Pity, maybe. Regret. Now she felt nothing but relief that she'd escaped a life with someone who crumbled the moment his comfort was threatened. Cordelia remained at large, vanished into the southern territories with whatever remained of her failed alliance. There would be consequences for that. Political complications, possible border conflicts, years of diplomatic headaches. But for now, there was peace. Or at least the fragile beginning of it. Bella had been given chambers in the eastern wing, beautiful rooms with mountain views and a fireplace large enough to stand in. She had new clothes, new weapons, a formal position as Nolan's advisor on internal security. She attended strategy meetings now, sat at tables where decisions that shaped kingdoms were made. People listened when she spoke, not because of her rank or bloodline, but because she'd earned it. She and Nolan circled each other like wary wolves, drawn together by shared trauma and undeniable attraction, but both too scarred to rush headlong into anything. They took meals together, walked